Thank you. You may be seated. On behalf of the Voke family, I want to say to everybody, thank you. Thank you for the messages. Thank you for the love. Thank you for the support. We know that there are so many people around the country and the world that are watching online. We want to greet those people too. And we want to just say that as we walked into this church this morning and as people began to fill in, one just got a sense of a family. And that's really what Selborne is. Selborne is a family. Whether you've left the institution, you never leave the people and the love and the friendships that you have gained over the years. Doug would want me to tell Adam to switch his phone off because he might still try and give you a call. He loved these kinds of things where he could embarrass people. But there are two types of people in the world. There are those that live in a mold, that are governed by rules and regulations and people's perceptions. And then there are those who live outside of the mold. I don't think Doug ever lived inside a mold. I think in the 70 years that he was alive, he always pushed the buttons, pushed the boundaries, created friends, cherished those friends, looked after them and loved them. There were days when he would joke about me in a PTA meeting in front of the parents. And I would walk into his office and I would have a go at him and I'd say, Doug, geez, you can't do these kinds of things. And the first thing he would say, you'll miss me when I'm gone. How right he was. How right he was. Doug, living outside of the mold, was able to love people outside of the rules. And so many times when I'm confronted with issues and people were confronted with struggles and traumas, because he lived outside of the mold, he dealt with those things. He loved those things. He cherished those things. And he helped people deal with those things outside of the mold. To those that knew Doug, to those that allowed Doug inside of them, you will hear what I'm saying. Doug had one of the biggest hearts that you will have ever experienced. To those that never allowed Doug in and kept Doug at arm's length because he was outside of the mold, may I say that you missed out on a very special human being. You will miss me when I am gone. In Romans chapter 8, verse 10, it says, but if Christ is in you, though the body is dead because of sin, the Spirit is life because of righteousness. If the Spirit of Him who raised Jesus from the dead and dwells in you, He who raised Christ from the dead will give life to your mortal bodies, also through the Spirit that dwells in you. The breath of God that raised Jesus from the dead will raise us too. And that is what we are confronted with here today. In saying farewell to Doug, we are confronted with where we are with Jesus Christ. On that Friday, when Jesus went to the place of dead, when he went to the place of dry, bony places, the place called Calvary, the place called the skull, death thought it had won. On that Saturday morning, when I was in that hospital room, it seemed like death had won. There was emptiness. There was shallowness. There was despair. But as the time passed, I was confronted with a place where I experienced what love was about. To the Voke family, you gave us, as friends and family around you, an inkling what it means to be a family in love with each other. And we thank you for that. I want to say, Liz, Daryl, Gareth, Brian, family, the Bible doesn't give us an answer to this. All it says to us in 1 Thessalonians is, "But I do not want you to be ignorant concerning those who have fallen asleep, lest you sorrow as others who have no hope." We will grieve. No words can take away that grief. But today we celebrate Christ's reunion with Doug, whilst we lament his departure from us. We feel at peace that he is no longer suffering, whilst we cry aloud because the only thing we have left are the precious memories that Doug forged with so many people in this church. Today we feel joy and pain simultaneously. We will cry hard today, we will laugh hard today, and we will come to terms that Boss Man is no longer with us to have a cold castle. But we come to say thank you, God, for allowing us to have crossed his path, because our lives will never be the same. And so I invite us just to close our eyes and to just ask God to be with us this morning. Our Heavenly Father, we come into this place filled with mixed emotions. We come into this place knowing, Lord God, that death is the only certainty we have. We come seeking that your Holy Spirit would descend upon each and every person here this morning. That each person here today will know that they have been touched by this love. I pray, Father God, that you would be with each and every one of us in our own special way. That as we walk out of this building, we will have walked out of an emotional farewell to a man whom you placed in our lives, whom you have allowed us to love. Thank you, Father God, that at times like this we can turn to you, knowing that you are the risen Christ. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I'm going to ask Mr. Sammy Gunn, who worked with Doug for many, many years, but was not just a colleague, but a friend. And I know somebody that he respected immensely. And so Mr. Gunn is just going to lay for us the foundation of why we are here, celebrating the life of Mr. Doug Voke. Thank you, Mr. Gunn.
Good morning, everyone. I'd just like to start by saying to Liz and the family, what an honor I deem this to be, to talk about such a wonderful, precious man. And before moving into any kind of celebratory mode, allow me to acknowledge the elephant in the room this morning. The fact that Doug's passing has generated a great deal of pain for his family, his many close friends, hundreds of colleagues, and thousands of those who were his pupils, now in their adulthood, who remember fondly the days when they called him Sir. My pain is born out of 17 years when we were privileged to jointly lead the great Selborne schools. And the many priceless moments we shared as co-leaders and friends. I can only imagine that the pain in my heart must be multiplied countless times in the hearts of those of his close personal friends, and especially in the hearts of the family. His beloved wife, Elizabeth, the 3 boys of whom he was so proud, Darryl, Gareth, Brian, and their partners, and his cherished grandchildren, Connor, Tori, Bailey, Georgia, and Mom, Zena, and sister, Glennis. May the happy memories of a warm, fun-filled man, your great love, your dad, your grandpa, help carry you through the difficult days as your emotions take time to heal. When I think about Doug, the dominant quality that explodes into my mind is that he was a man of passion, great passion. In the years that I knew him, that passion was focused pretty much exclusively on the Selborne schools. But what about his family? Shame, you may ask. And my answer would be, not to worry. His family was also Selborne. Liz at the side of her man, rooting for him and rooting for the black and white. His 3 boys, smart, proud, and successful in their black and white blazers. They were the Vokes, a veritable mini Selborne. There's a corny cliche that goes, how do you know that a man went to Selborne? Answer, he'll tell you. Doug Voke never had to tell anyone that he went to Selborne. He simply oozed Selborne. Passion for the black and white is not an uncommon commodity among the boys as they pass through the portals of the school, nor among old boys as they fondly remember their days at the Selborne schools. If you could measure this passion, I'm sure that Doug would be found in the very top few of the Selborne men who loved their school so. I believe that his extraordinary passion had its beginnings in 1966, when he was denied the opportunity to come up to the college, having completed his schooling at Selborne Primary. The reason was that his dad was transferred to Cape Town. In 1988, that dream that he had had became a dream opportunity when he was appointed as deputy headmaster to Selborne Primary. And then, in 1998, the opportunity of a lifetime presented itself as he was elevated to the headship of his best school in the world, Selborne Primary. It is a little wonder that he had passion in spades to drive him through the highly successful term of office that lasted 19 years. In my view, Doug's success as a headmaster rested on 3 pillars: the development of physical infrastructure, curricular and co-curricular growth, and on his positive qualities as an educator, manager, and person. These all combined to navigate Selborne Primary successfully into the 21st century. The completion of the multi-purpose centre, an indoor swimming pool, an IT centre, a music centre, much broadened the possibilities at the primary and were a source of great satisfaction to Doug. Never one to be complacent, Doug constantly sought ways to enhance the curricular and co-curricular programs. At the school, assisted by his staff, he oversaw many initiatives in this sphere. Sports tournaments were held, social outreach programs conducted, exchanges with English schools were developed and expanded, and significant strides were made in the field of information technology. Thirdly, a skim through the qualities of Doug Voke, the man, will help explain why he was such a successful educator and headmaster. and fondly regarded member of the wide circle of friends and colleagues. We have already touched on his passionate nature. He was also a warm, caring man, full of energy and fun. Ideal qualities for a primary school teacher. He was also a positive man. Other than ties and the education department, there was little that got him down. The Selborne schools were indeed fortunate that the 7th primary headmaster was an old school educator who stressed manners, respect, a rounded education, and a curriculum focus on the basics of English and mathematics, which laid such a strong foundation for the college to work on. The primary was also fortunate that Doug had the necessary skills to successfully manage a talented staff that had a wide range of interests and approaches to the art of educating young boys. The lads from the primary were certainly well equipped with sound cognitive building blocks and enough human breadth to cope easily with the final 5 years of schooling. Schools like Selborne put great stress on team sports in the belief that they do much to help prepare pupils for a life of human cooperation after school. They teach how to work in a group towards a common goal. They teach that people with very different talents and approaches can achieve things together, and so on. Doug's great sporting passion was rugby. He himself was a successful club player in Cape Town, a Cheslin Colby type, I believe. On the small side, but fast and elusive, and often unpredictable, but always with the club colours close to his heart. My humble rugby career ended at school in Standard 9 as a fullback in the 3rd team, a Lionel Wilson type, dependable and solid in defence, a very different player from dashing Doug. I wonder how many people in this gathering know who Lionel Wilson was. That's a long time ago. But if you know the man, you will know what I mean by solid and reliable. Well, these two players were brought together in 1998 to lead Team Selborne, and despite our different natures, we enjoyed a warm working relationship for 17 years when I came to value Doug as a highly supportive and enthusiastic teammate. When I said that Doug was passionate about Selborne, I must emphasize he was passionate about the whole Selborne. For him, it was just one school. My fondest memories of Doug are at rugby matches and on Founders' Days. He hardly ever missed a first 15 match, despite having had a full morning of matches at the primary. He would come onto the stand, sit fairly close by, and despite the noise of the crowd, we could often interchange little quips and comments. Thank goodness none of them reached the social media and simply went up into the ether. Founders' Days were very, very special days at both the primary and the college. Wonderful days of togetherness, when Doug and Liz would hit you with their full force of the warm hospitality at the primary, or their powerful support at the college. More often than not, the Vokes and the Guns would, with a few other hardy souls, be the last members of the main lunch table to leave after a meal of epic proportions, and feeling how fortunate we were to be at the grandest school in the world. Thank you, Doug, for your warm friendship and passionate support. The Selborne schools will be forever in your debt. Your race, enthusiastically run. We pray for your soul as it now rests with our Heavenly Father.
My journey to this funeral podium started some 7 years ago, where Doug called me into his office and told me that as his headmaster, I would do his funeral. And I wondered why, and it dawned on me this morning, because if I was doing the eulogy, I would tarnish his name. The days we spent peeing against the Selborne bus, the days we spent screaming at the ref because Doug Voke was the captain of the under-11 E team. We only had 4 teams, but he was the captain of the E team. But we swore at the ref, and he swore me blind. He said, Gareth, never tell the staff what I just did. This was a man that just seasoned everybody's life. But there's a saying, and I'm going to do things slightly unconventional, and I do apologize if this offends anybody in a church, and I really do. But the one thing that Doug asked me to promise is that I would acknowledge the role that his family played. And I will do that because he was so right. Mrs. Voke, he loved you. He really loved you. Con, Tori, when you look at the 3 sons he had, he was so relieved that finally he had something to be proud of. He loved you. You were the absolute apple of his eye. Bobby. What an incredible name to be called by each other. It was just so unique. To Brian, Daryl, Gareth, a father could never be prouder of the children that he had, what your dad was. He loved your wives, and Jackie. He was so proud of Jackie, the way she didn't just go and buy a car, but I remember him coming back and she did all the dirty work and looked at the Haval, and just such a clever young lady. To Liz, thank you for giving us Doug, because it wasn't hard. I think a lot of us on the inner circle knew that there were difficult days. You had to carry the struggles and the pain of what was going wrong. But you just, in your gracious, most beautiful way, supported a very, very powerful man. And you did it with such grace, with such ease, and with such love. And this is where I'm going to deviate. I'm going to ask us to stand, and just for 10 seconds, that we can all say thank you to this beautiful family. I'd like to lead us in a time of applause. So if you would stand with me, and let's acknowledge this incredible family as we pay tribute to Doug. Thank you to the Voke family for everything that you gave us in Doug. Thank you. Please be seated. Oh, please stand. Please stand. Be seated. Doug would enjoy that. We're going to join together as we sing a hymn or a song that the family have requested that we sing. I think the words are going to be up over there, and I invite us just to know that this was one of Doug's favorite songs, and as we sing it, let's sing it as a tribute, as a family, singing out to somebody whom we loved.
Lord, I come to you Lord, I've come to know the weaknesses I see in me will be stripped away by the power of your love. Hold me close, let your love surround me. Bring me near, draw me to your side. And as I wait, I'll rise up like the eagle, and I will soar with you. Your spirit leads me on in the power of your love. Lord, unveil my eyes, let me see you face to face, the knowledge of your love as you live in me. Lord, renew my mind as your will unfolds in my life, in living every day by the power of your love. Hold me close, let your love surround me. Bring me near, draw me to your side. And as I wait, I'll rise up like the eagle, and I will soar with you. Your spirit leads me on in the power of your love. And I will soar with you. Your spirit leads me on in the power of your love.
Thank you. Please be seated. And call on Reese to lead us further.
I'm privileged to know Mr. Voke in many ways. He was a mentor, leader, the headmaster, the boss. He was a fellow Selbornian, and he was also our friend. An odd dynamic indeed. Saturday afternoon, touch rugby in Allenby Road on the Voke's lawn was a very indifferent weekend. But a potential call to the headmaster's office on Monday morning would still strike some fear. Mr. Voke, the headmaster and Selbornian. I made my way from pups to the college through the years 2001 to 2014, all through which time he was the primary headmaster. I've seen an innumerable number of messages and posts from Selbornians of my era sharing their anecdotes about what Mr. Voke did for them. So much so, I can't imagine that Mr. Voke would remember many of these stories, but does speak to what he did for thousands of young men like me. We were taught to be polite, to be courteous, and to be gentlemen. We were taught to tackle low. At a tender age, we knew Mr. Voke to be fearless to defend what is right and to do what is right. An intercom call to the headmaster's office was fearing and respect demanding, but you left being treated fairly. All that being said, you were still more likely to be called to the office to show off some good work or show off a talent that your class teacher might have given a tip-off about. The same day would see Mr. Voke in his shorts bowling leg spinners to us in the nets, and the 2006 under 10A team were lucky enough to see one or two full-paced beamers. There was no homework on Fridays. We were encouraged to make friends and to play in team sports where all our differences were welcomed. This undoubtedly established the building blocks for the sense of camaraderie, brotherhood, and togetherness that we all feel so palpably in the Selborne and East London communities. Then Mr. Voke, our friend. When Mr. Voke blended into a first name. It's difficult to summarize so many years of friendship with the Pinots in one short go. From many, many, many weekends away and overseas trips with my parents. Trips literally up and down the entire country at the drop of a hat to support my dad's running. Holidays felt incomplete when the Vokes weren't around. I certainly was too small to remember such a time. Mr. and Mrs. Voke supported my mom and dad with my ailing grandparents and have always been giving of their time, love, support so eagerly. For someone with so much on his plate, the thought that he gave to us so freely of his time and energy is a void that we will always feel. His laugh, smile, fishing knots, and quiet whistling of Blueberry Hill is sorely, sorely missed. Mr. Voke took joy in Lloyd and I and loved us as his own, joining us on our journey through school and our careers. We too, like so many people here, feel we lost a family member. I want to read a short letter that Mr. Voke wrote for me when I was 17 or 18 years old, and they're words that I've held closely since. It reads, Reese, something to ponder. Enjoy the teen years while you still can. There will never again be a time in your life where a simple kiss means so much, or when an A+ means everything. Once you grow up, that all goes away. So enjoy being young and free while you still can. It's amazing how far you're willing to go when someone believes in you. We do. I hold Selborne very close to my heart, and I have no naivety to know that it would not have been the same without Mr. Voke. So I do take it on behalf of both my family and literally thousands of Selborne primary boys to say thank you. We did become gentlemen, and you can be proud.
I was teaching maths one day, and I was teaching, I don't know, I've forgotten what you call them now, but where you go powers and indices, and you know, I was teaching that one day, and it was very important to get the boys to understand that, and I got a knock on the door. There was Mr. Voke. I said, "Hello, sir." And I was very nervous. I thought I was being sort of tested, and looked up on. He said, "I got a problem. My friend Jeff is coming to visit, and my DSTV is not connected." I said, "And yes?" He said, "Well, you're going to my house, I'm going to look after your maths class, and you're going to fix the DSTV. I said, "I know nothing about it." He says, "You know more than I do." And so I went to the sports office, I got Mr. Govind, there was an Indian and a white oak, across the road, and off we went to fix Mr. Voke's TV because Jeff was coming. Well, 7 hours later, and some TV company that had been called, we got this thing to work. And of course, we had a few beers with Mr. Voke to say thank you. But we never told him about the 1,500 Rand that Mr. Gowan and I had to pay so that Jeff could have DSTV. Now, the reason why I'm sharing this is because there is something very unique about Doug Voke. He had 3 friends longer than he was married. And to Miles, to Brian, and to Jeff, they shared a friendship that makes you understand the value of humanity. They shared a friendship that dates back years and years, decades. They shared a friendship that even though they were in different parts of the world, there was still something very special and unique. Now, we all know, is this being recorded? Is it live? We all know that Selborne Primary is far superior to Hudson, Sterling, and Ganubi. Must I repeat that again? We all know. And yet, because Miles was at Sterling, Brian was at Ganubi, he didn't really care about Hudson because Mr. Kennedy was there. There was a bond and a friendship that he was so intent on creating amongst the schools of East London. And for Doug, it was so important, those after drinks, after the matches, getting together, talking about the matches and whatever the situation, because that was the kind of person. And today, we are so privileged to have Miles and Brian share with us a little bit, because you can't. You cannot put into words today what this friendship actually means. But thank you for putting yourselves up for this, to just give us something of a very, very special friend and human being. So to Miles and Brian, and on behalf of Jeff, I welcome you and thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. It looks like we're going to sing a duet, but we're not going to. We're going to save you that.
He asked me to hold his hand.
Oops. Okay, you can have it if you want it. Okay, Gareth, I'm going to save you some trouble. You don't have to tarnish Doug's name. I'll do that for you. Okay. This is a time of sadness for all of us, for the families and for all his friends who are here. But I was one of those, together with his family and a few other friends, who happened to be with him in the last day or two that he was with us. And that was very special. On the last morning before he passed away, Sue and I were there with parts of the family, in fact the whole family, and I had a chance to actually get all the tubes aside and, get close to him. And I put my head next to his and I spoke to him. Now, I know some people say, do the people really understand? Can they hear you? We don't know that. But I had my last words with him. I had a few harsh words with him that he left us without asking permission. And then I made him a promise and I made myself a promise. I'm not going to mope about him leaving us. He did so much for us and he meant so much to us, and he's gone. I am going to celebrate from that day onwards, including today and forever, the amazing gift that he gave us, that special bond that he created in us. And I'm going to celebrate his love and his life with us because it meant so much. It will always mean so much. So, just a few points that I need to share because a lot of people wonder what we're all about. Gareth has sung our praises, which is wonderful. But we've known Doug, Miles and I and Jeff, and I was a bit perturbed when Gareth went and Jeff, he's only in Estonia, he hasn't gone yet. And there is a little message from him after Miles and I have spoken, just to show that he was also here. But Miles and Jeff and I have known Doug for longer than any of you here, I think. I speak under correction, except of course for Mom, Granny Voke and Glennis, but LCB, we beat you as well. We knew him before you did because you arrived at college a few months later, so sorry for you. Take a second. However, you are having the last laugh because typical of Doug's quirky humor, Sue and I were visiting East London towards the beginning of last year. And I think he was beginning to feel really poorly at that stage. We were at their house in Glen Stewart. And he was sitting on the edge of his bed one evening like this. And I said, Doug, are you okay? And we were all there. Rib was there, Sue, I was there. And he sat on the end of his bed and he said, I just wish that my wife would die and leave me in peace. She thought it was funny, we all thought it was funny, but that's the kind of guy he was, unpredictable and quirky. It's just like that. We spent a week at Gareth and Jax's house in Somerset West. Best week we've ever had, Sue and I, and just the two, Doug and Liv. The best thing ever. And Mrs. Voke, you'll recall you said something and we started laughing uncontrollably, and it was not fair because we were actually laughing at something you and Doug had said without you knowing about it. He asked you about your health and you said, I'm all right, Dougie, with your finger, I'm all right, Dougie, but sometimes my eyes water uncontrollably. And Doug, typical, sitting with these glasses on the end of his nose, looked and said, at least your pot plants must be happy. Yeah, when we met in Grafnet in 1973, that is a long time. It's if you take it to the 18th when school started, or around about there, it will be exactly 51 years ago. It's a half a century and a half. Unfortunately, Doug was trapped LBW, so he's out, but the rest of us are still batting for a while. It was Doug was a funny sort of guy. Cheslin Colby, I like the way that you said that, Gareth, because in many ways he was slightly lighter in color, but otherwise all the signs are there. Because he was quite full of himself, stocky guy, good looking, heads turned, females when you walk past, a little snorticky, the guy from Cape Town. And he actually, we weren't sure about him because he played for False Bay and he played for Western Province. And then I spoke to his three boys the other day, and I said, did he really play for Western Province? And they said, no, he thinks he might have been on the bench for Western Province, which eventually made me think of the bomb squad. Doug, and he was there. He never got to run on, ever, but he was on the bench. He did play for Western Province B with great aplomb, scored some amazing Colby-type tries, which he really did, spectacular stuff. But now, in his first year, for some reason, Miles was playing hockey. Doug then decided to play hockey as well, and so that's where their friendship started. Miles and I were friends because we're both from the Stadtheim area, and Jeff and I in class had started a friendship, and suddenly we just got whoop, and we were just together, and that's where it was. Doug was so impressed with all the trouble we caused. He didn't quite put it in the words that we did. He just said, because he came from a very, this is Reverend Voke's son, you understand. So people caused trouble, it was calling, you caused dung. A nice acceptable word like cow dung. We caused a lot of dung. So when he went home after the first semester, he printed us, the four of us, sky blue t-shirts with the word Dungsim written in front, Dungsim 4, and we had numbers. I was 1 and then 2, 3, 4, as you'll hear later on in that little song that comes out. And but we said, why have you spelled it like that? He spelled D-U-N-G-S-U-M instead of D-U-N-G-S-O-M-E, a Dungsim. He said, well, my parents wouldn't sponsor this little episode, so I had to use my pocket money. And then when I got to the lettering, I ran out of money, so I had to cut the Dungsim short and just add S-U-M. And that's what we wore until Miles has still got his. Anyway, that's how it started. But, we did cause a lot of dung. It's just but fun dung. Okay. I mean, let's go, if you look at 1973, we were all born in 1953, and the stars just aligned because a litre of petrol was 53 cents, going to the drive-in or to movies was 53 cents per person, and a bottle of Autumn Harvest Crackling cost 53 cents a litre. And all those things just led to stories which I can't repeat, fortunately. But we split up in 1975 because that was the end of our 3-year stint there. Doug and I went to UCT to do a diploma in special class teaching. Miles stayed on at Grafnet to do a 4th-year woodwork, and Jeff, bless his soul, did what we were meant to do. He went teaching and he got a post at Cambridge. I'm nearly done. There we go. Once you get onto the second page, you can see the end. So the Voke contingent and the Schwartz contingent were in the Western Cape. These other two were still border people. But we did have some times together, fun times. However, Doug was quick off the mark. He started the family first. And we were sitting at a lecture in psychology at UCT. And Liz had dropped him off at the place where I was boarding, and we'd gone up to UCT on his bike, which was parked permanently at my place. And then she went to the hospital because she had to check on the baby and all the rest of it. And while we were sitting in there, the secretary lady ran in and said to Mr. Misk, who was our lecturer, and she whispered in his ear, and she said something, and he went like this, ah. And Doug said, my wife's been up to something, she's being silly now. That's all he said. My wife is being silly, I can just see it. She went in, and Daryl had breached. I thought he was a whale, but he had breached. That's what And Douglas said, I told you. So when Mr. Misk said, Mr. Voke, I jumped up first. Yeah, me. Oh, him. Douglas. And so he said, who is Mr. Voke, actually? So anyway, we both got onto the bicycle, rushed down to the Mowbray Maternity Hospital. I was sitting at the back. He was on the crossbar, and we lost control of the brakes because two big souls like that with two little brake blocks on the end ain't going to work. Through the rhododendrons, through all the flowers that when we got there in time. But things like that stick, and you know, when these friends eventually came to Cape Town, we had other silly parties, but good things come to an end. In 1975, now it was 15 years after we had left college, separated but still close and friends, Doug applied for the post at Selborne Primary and got it. Miles had been promoted to as an HOD at Cambridge. I then applied to move to Cambridge and got a post there. It smacks of a bit of nepotism, but it gets done all the time now, so that doesn't really matter. And Jeff became the headmaster of College Street Primary. So once again, the foursome were united in one place. And things didn't cost 53 cents anymore, and that was a problem. Miles will tell you.
I think that deserves a round of applause. I used a bit of technology and typed mine up, which took me a couple of hours. But anyway, Brian, thanks for that intro. I'll try and pick up from where Brian left off, but just thanks to Liz for asking me to say a few words. It means a hell of a lot to me. Granny Zena, to see you here today, very special. And the Voke family, wonderful to be able to share this moment with you. All right, so our Dunxam bond remained very strong over the years, as Brian had indicated. And of course, once you've lived in the border area, you have this desire to return. And Brian already touched on the fact that he'd returned to the border area. And then, of course, the big news broke that Doug had accepted a post at Selborne Primary. This sent us sent shockwaves through the Dunxam, and of course we eagerly awaited the arrival of Doug. Unfortunately, I better follow my notes here. This is very special, but unfortunately Doug had to come up on his own, had to leave Liz and the boys in Cape Town to tie up a few loose ends, and Doug needed a place to stay. How it happened, I don't know whether it's the toss of a coin or whatever, but anyway, he landed up with Bev and I. What better than to have one of your best mates living with you? Not that I didn't enjoy living with Mommy, but you know, it took it to a new level. It gave you that opportunity to just have an extra beer or extra glass of wine every evening. Now Doug, of course, living with a guy and having him in your home, you get to know a slightly different part of him. He was a very fussy eater. I don't know if you actually knew that. So Doug didn't like gungy food. In fact, he used that word. Don't mix things up. Don't give me sloppy food. Don't pour gravy all over it. He liked things to be clearly identified on the plate. But he did eventually admit to loving Bev's spaghetti bolognese. Anyway, at this time, Jeff happened to also be at Selborne. A post came up, and I applied and joined the Selborne team. And these were very, very happy and productive teaching days. And of course, the daily staff room chatter was very special. And at this time, I must just add that it was an absolute privilege to teach with and eventually under Doug when he eventually became headmaster. He led from the front. He loved rolling up his sleeves, climbing into the trenches with his staff, ensured that his staff were well cared for, and never expected them to do anything that he couldn't do. In fact, he was considered to be one of the best rugger and cricket coaches in the border area, and also a very respected under-9 rugby ref, and that takes some doing, because you not only have to manage the kids, but you've got to manage the parents as well. Doug was a devoted family man, and I fondly remember him and I often taking tours away to various parts of the country, and on 2 occasions we took rugger sides away to Cape Town, and he always insisted that we try and take our families with us. And I vividly remember my 2 daughters, Candace and Nicole, sitting in the back of the Selborne bus, clutching their bosoms and singing, "From the waters of Victoria." It is just very special. Doug and Liz eventually bought a house, 2 houses down, 2 doors away from us in Bamberg Road. And this led to many years of special friendship. Our children formed special friendship bonds for life, and the Voke boys at last had sisters, and the Dell girls eventually had brothers. This led to many evenings, of course, of entertainment by the gang. Daryl, Gareth, and Candace would play the senior roles, while poor Brian and Nicole had to play the lesser roles, example being a tree or a rock. Throughout our years of friendship, up to about 2010, we would annually gather for about 3 weeks of camping at Glen Eden Caravan Park. And I must say, this is when the sun used to still shine at Christmas time. If you were camping this last Christmas, you would know what I mean. In those early days, we were all up in East London, and Doug and Liz had to move up from Cape Town. And the one particular year, we're not sure whether they had all their camping equipment. I emphasize the word all, because when it came to setting up, suddenly the tent poles could not be found. And a tent, of course, is of very little use without poles. Anyway, these were eventually couriered up, and the holiday proceeded as it should. These holidays were very special in so many ways, with the highlights being the daily trips to the beach with all the kids piled onto the back of the bucky, beach games, fishing and catching very little, the Glen Eden tennis tournament, which I'll tell you a little bit about just now, and of course the evening braais. And of course at the end of each holiday, we'd have a prize giving based on the holiday's activities. And the shirt I'm wearing is the shirt Doug gave us as he was chairman of the Dunsum that year in 1996. And this is the shirt he gave us. Anyway, so one evening around the braai fire, Doug suggested that we should get up very early the next morning and go fishing. The fishing had been poorly that year, so we all agreed that we're getting up at the screech of dawn. It was about 4 o'clock when Doug came around rattling the cage. "Come on, guys, let's go, let's go, let's go." And we headed off down to the Glen Eden Point. I'm not following my notes again. Anyway, so we put on large pieces of bait and threw in here and threw in there, tried big hooks, small hooks, pull shit, you name it, nothing. Next minute, we see this guy coming along at the corner of our eye, short little guy with a small rod and a couple of lures. And Doug turns around and says, "I wonder if this oak knows what he's doing." Anyway, it wasn't long. This guy had landed a cob and then a kingfish and an assortment of other fish and made us look like absolute idiots. And he had all these fish swimming around the pool. So eventually we succumbed and went and chatted to him. He said, "No, guys, what you got to do for this kind of water over there, you use this kind of lure, and that deep blue water over there, you use this kind of lure." I said, "Okay, thanks, my pal." And of course, we rushed back to camp, had breakfast, and we rushed into town to go and buy an assortment of lures. Next morning, up early at the screech of dawn, same spot, same time, same place, same conditions, everything. Within an hour, every single lure was either attached to the bottom of the ocean or was still flying across the bay towards yellow sands, and not a single fish caught. Another disastrous fishing outing. While camping the one year, Doug started laying some blame on us. And one of his favorites was, he started trying to blame us for his love of beer. And we said, no, Doug, and of course his relaxed tummy as well. You know, he had a nice little bit of a tum-tum. So according to Doug, this is his story. According to the Doug, being from Cape Town, he enjoyed the odd glass of wine. But apparently, while we were camping, we encouraged him to try a beer or two. And of course, the rest is history. Then, of course, with his tummy as well. I said, Doug, of course, you know, was toned and honed, and with his shirt off, as Brian said, he would turn a few heads. He had these nice big pork chop sideburns. He was, you know, all these, the right muscles in the right places. And apparently, we said to him, Doug, you know, you make us feel quite uncomfortable. Why don't you just sort of relax the tummy a bit? Well, then I think the rest was history. But I'm just wondering whether it wasn't anything to do with the beer. Anyway, the annual Glen Eden tennis tournaments were one of the highlights of the holidays. The one year Doug and I teamed up, and undoubtedly one of our greatest achievements was an unexpected victory over a fancy doubles partner from Joburg. I had a reasonable serve, which, if it went in, could cause a bit of damage. But Doug was our secret weapon. Okay, his serves from the baseline would be cut and just make it over the net. So you'd have these guys charging in from the baseline, throwing their bodies at the ball, either hitting it into the net or playing it over the baseline. And because they're totally unpredictable. And when they did get it in, Doug would return it with one of these, and it would just make it over the net and then sort of bounce back towards us again. And we had them absolutely flummoxed. Needless to say, after an encounter of biblical proportion, Doug and I won the match, to tumultuous applause from all the folks seated on their deck chairs around the tennis court at Glen Eden. Never forget that one. Okay, fishing. Fishing and the desire to catch fish ran deep in Doug's veins. He loved spending money on equipment and fishing equipment, and he loved a visit to the fishing shop. He could consume fishing equipment like you can't believe. One day, we were eagerly heading off to go and fish, our rods proudly out the back window of his BMW, and we're reversing out the driveway. Next minute, crunch. His beautiful carbon fiber Butterworth rod caught a branch and snap in half. He was devastated. To coin a phrase, he hated himself. Remember that one, guys? The one day, we're heading out to the Pinkies farm to go and catch bass, and we all kitted out, and we all set off to the Pinkies farm. Had Liz and Bev in the back, the boys in the front, in these famous little BMW. The girls are complaining about the wind in the back. Dad said, no problem, don't worry, girls. Hits the electric window button. Little did he realize that our rods are out the back window. And, yep, well, you can guess what happens. Bzzz, crunch, 2 rods in their glory. This is the kind of thing that happened to Doug. He could just go through this fishing equipment like you can't believe. And this last one was an absolute classic. We're fishing on the Transkei at one of our annual fishing outings. And he's caught up, and he was performing what we call the Glen Eden Shuffle, trying to free his sinker. Anyway, the sinker comes loose, and I'm standing up on a ledge, baiting up, and I can see the sinker coming back at him like a missile through the air. Doug's holding his rod up, and the sinker hits the rod slap bang midships. 1 times broken rod. Anyway, to solve all our fishing problems, Doug and I eventually bought a semi-rigid fishing rubber duck called Sunbird. Sunbird had all the bells and whistles. A fish finder that could find no fish. All the necessary safety equipment, life jackets, flares, etc., which you use when you're in distress. which we eventually discovered were all outdated, and a fancy two-way radio, which we never ever got to use. We just didn't know how to use it. We'd be far out in the ocean, and Doug would see a tanker coming past, and he'd switch on the radio. Tanker one, tanker one, tanker one, Sunbird, yeah, come in. We'd never get a response. Anyway, at last we had fishing success. We enjoyed many a fishing outing and actually managed to catch fish. But on the one day, and this is a classic, we're fishing out near Ganubi. I think Brian was with us, and the sea was dead. And Doug said, let's try drifting. He says, there's some lovely currents here. So up anchor, and Sunbird is drifting along. We've got our lines down. Next minute, geez, all the lines are going down, and this, that, and the other. Geez, in here, Doug's got a black stem ross. Brian's caught a 74, and he's got a Miss Lucy, and we're murdering the fish. And we've got big smiles on our face like this. The fish are going into the fishing bin. Next minute, we see a boat coming up in the distance, and they stop some distance for us. Hey, you guys in the yellow rubber duck, what do you think you're doing? So, no, don't worry, buddy, we're just fishing. You are in a reserve, it's a protected area. Anyway, I said, okay, sorry, guys, sorry, we'll leave right now. But of course, we had all the fish we wanted. Last one. On another occasion, we tried our hand at trolling. And so we were trolling off the coast of Yellow Sands. And we had the rods going out and the motors going zzzz, and the lures are out there. And next minute, this gannet. Now, gannet is a lethal bird. You'll see them diving for the shoals of sardines when they come past. This gannet dives and hits Doug's lure and gets entangled with the lure. So, of course, Doug reels in. Now we've got a gannet flapping around in the boat. It's got a beak about this long. We've got a lure with treble hooks all around, and you've got the two pontoons of the rubber duck here, and we're just waiting for an accident to happen. Anyway, we managed to free the bird and the lure, and in goes the lure again. And about 5 minutes later, Doug's reel goes down, Doug's rod goes down again. Bang! Zzz. Now we know this is a fish. Anyway, Doug is fighting the fish. He says, oh, okay, slow down, bro, go left, go right, and all this type of thing. Get the gaff ready. And we're reeling in. Next minute, Doug's reel explodes. Boah! And now there's just line all over the place. The fish is traveling. So we turn the boat around now. We start chasing this fish, and Doug's pulling it in with a hand line. And eventually we get close enough, and with a gaff, we gaff this fish and bring it into the boat. It was our best and biggest fish ever. And we eventually bring this thing in, and was identified as an East Coast tuna. Ollie, does that sound right? Is there such a thing? Okay, Ollie says, yeah. Folks, I think I must finish now. Brian's saying, stop now, before you come out with something else that you shouldn't say. I'd like to just to conclude by saying that Doug was a real friend. You could count on him any time of day or night. We will all miss him terribly, and that is why we are all here today, to say our last goodbyes. Doug, the Dunxam Four will never be the same, as only 3 of us remain. Lots of love, my dear friend. Tight lines, and until we meet again. And Brian's got a little snippet. He's going to be playing from Jeff from Estonia.
Hello to all. Jeff Scott here from snowy minus 21 degrees Estonia. I'm sure Miles and Brian have done a great job reporting on the Dunxam friendship. I received a message from Doug on Friday the 1st of December, just 3 weeks before his passing, and I thought it would be appropriate just to read to you the way this man was, and always was, and will always be in my mind. Hi, Jeffy. Lying watching a replay of some old Sevens final. I'm missing the physical side of life, although I've not been too active of late anyway. I'm losing my hair, so my razor will be back in use. And this isn't a funny Doug now. Time for a bog. Another pain in the arse. Sleep tight, chin up, old chum. And that's Doug, in that state, telling me to keep my chin up. What a man. I just thought that it would be a fitting farewell just to sing one last new verse of the old Dungsum ditty, that song which we've stolen from the old gypsy, what not gypsy, oh my goodness, old age. It's an old Irish song anyway, you'll know the tune. And we've added verses to it over the years. First it was just the Dungsum, and another verse then for the Dungsum wives, and then another verse went in for the 9 Dungsum children. And so it went on. And, I think I might sing one last verse. Young Brian Voke has taken over with a magnificent voice and accomplished guitar accompaniment. So this will be the last time that I'll sing this song. Promise. I thought like this. Now we were a foursome, more than 50 years. The 4 are now 3, and we're shedding some tears. But I know that you're listening with one castle or more. So here's the last chorus for our Dungsum 4. And it's oh yeah, Dungsum. Now at this point we used to go 1, 2, 3, 4 in order of our size. And Doug was number 2, so I was the shortest. So we'll have to leave 2 out. Get on with it, Jeffrey. And it's oh yeah, Dungsum. 1, 3, 4. We're the Dungsum 4. Together forever. The Dungsum 4. Cheers, Doug. See you at Old Boys for a Castle.
Hi everyone, my name is Connor and I am the one and only grandson. This ultimately means that I was gifted the role from my very first seconds on this earth as the favorite folk. Now, not many people in their families show their favorites, but I think I can say with heart that my grandpa made it very well known that I was his. On the 23rd of December 2023, I lost my idol, my role model, our Bobby. I couldn't think of a better way to portray my message than that through a poem, just as he would have loved. So this is for you, Bobby. In the heart of Selborne, a legend stood, a leader, a mentor, all that's good. Doug Voke, they called him, Bobby with affection, a husband, a father, a grandfather, a cherished connection. From Selborne Primary's halls he led, 30 years of service, where dreams were bred. Headmaster, mentor, a guiding light, teaching boys to be men with all his might. In classrooms and on fields, his passion grew, for academics, sports, and friendships true. Rugby's cheer echoed, his coaching strong, a fearless leader, in hearts he belongs. Dougie, they said, with love and grace, a father figure, a warm embrace. Dad jokes and dances, memories unfold, laughter and love, a story to be told. To Liz and the sons, our hearts extend, in this time of sorrow, as memories blend. To the Selborne community, East London's friend, a legend departed, on whom hearts depend. The life of the party, the glue to the clan, Bobby's legacy lives as only legends can. The rooms may dim without his light, in our hearts he shines forever bright. Goodbye, dear Doug, to the stars you've soared. In our memories, you're adored. May the castle be as flow, a toast to your name. and banana sterry stumpies, just the same. Picture us fishing in the stream of the past, reeling in tales, some big, some tall, all a blast. A legend, our Bobby, forever in our hearts. Rest peacefully where your spirit imparts. Watch over us, Bobby, until we meet again. In the echoes of laughter and stories, let your spirit remain.
Good morning, friends and family. A very good friend of mine contacted me 3 or 4 days ago and asked for my permission to add a snippet into his podcast, which was going to be aired live on True FM, to which obviously I agreed. His name is Songezo Mabekre, and this is the tribute that he posted for my dad.
Here's something that just came to me, and I'm minded to reflect on it, and it's deeply personal. Selborne Primary School. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the Voke family at the passing of Mr. Doug Voke. Mr. Voke was the 7th headmaster of Selborne Primary School. He served Selborne Primary School faithfully from January 1988, when he was the first appointed as deputy headmaster. He then went on to become the headmaster, a role that he capably fulfilled for 20 years. He served Selborne Primary for 30 years in total. During that time, Mr. Voke was instrumental in leading the school with a vision and enthusiasm. He had a passion for teaching boys to be gentlemen. Over and above that, he was fervent about academics and even more so, his sport. He absolutely loved his rugby and was a great coach and supporter of the game. During his tenure, staff saw him as a father figure, and he utterly loved them and was always protective over them. Mr. Voke always saw the good in everybody and played to the respective strength of all his staff members. He was an inspiration to many, and he was a pillar of the Selborne and East London communities. A fearless leader, Doug Voke was passionate about Selborne, and as an old boy headmaster, he was also an intensely loyal friend to many. He was dearly loved and will be sorely missed. Our thoughts and prayers go out to Liz and their sons Daryl, Gareth and Brian and their respective families, as well as his aged mother Zina and sister Glenys during this tragic time. Palma Vertuti. Now, 2 minutes. Who is Doug Voke and how do I know him? 1992, I enrolled at Selborne Primary. Sub B. Werner, as it was then called, was my class teacher, Aileen Werner. My classmate was one Brian Voke in 1992. He would also be my classmate at the end of our primary school career in 1997 in Standard 5, McCullum. Brian Voke is Doug Voke's son. Brian Voke is a good friend of mine. Brian Voke has lost his father. His older brother, Gareth, was my senior in high school. When I started in Standard 6, Gareth was in Standard 10 matric. He was a kind of gentle soul. Chirpy and cocky was Gareth, but kind and gentle. He played second-team cricket, and I was his scorer in the summer season because his coach, Mr. Norman, was my hostel superintendent. And then Daryl. I lived with Daryl. Daryl, the older brother, was not my contemporary, but he was my housemaster at Selborne Primary in the year 1995, at the time at which he was doing his post-matric at Selborne College. It was at the same year that I got into Mr. Voke's class for the first time, in 1996 actually, in life skills, and the following year in the science class. So he taught me for 2 years. To boot, in my Standard 5 year, was my under 13A rugby coach. I played wing for him, a position he played, incidentally, for Western Province B in his time, being a Cape boy. Left the primary school, went on to the college. Being a contemporary of Brian, I was obviously always going to see Mr. Voke on the sidelines of the hockey and rugby pitches at the high school. It was always an affable exchange between pupil and master, Mr. Voke Songezo, on a first-name basis with me, obviously. He was always chirpy, and again, he was always cocky. Sometimes many would even say he was arrogant. It was the Voke way. Of the many things Mr. Voke taught me, because he was my headmaster in 1997 when Mr. Ken Schaefer retired mid of that year. Throughout high school and throughout my university years, which I did in East London, in meeting Mr. Voke, one thing is true. He gave as good as he got, and he was able to take what he gave. He was honest. If the things he can be accused of, dishonesty is not one of them. He was firm, he was fair and frank. And he did err. He was human after all. It's a human condition. He got one or two things wrong and he got one or two things right. And where he got personally one or two things wrong, I brought it to his attention. If there's one thing I respected about him, he responded to being called out. In the smile that he wore, gentle, sweet, inviting. The last time I saw him was in October 2022 on the occasion of my 20th reunion. 20th reunion since leaving school together with Brian. A shadow of his former self. He was sickly. He was not looking well. I told him as such. And he did only take me slightly into his confidence by saying, "I'm not well, but all will be well." My last exchange with him was sometime middle of last year when I learned from him that he was going through chemo. And what I said, I hope he takes with him to wherever he is right now. It reads, and this is my parting shot on this note. Meneer, how are you? Tell me you are fighting and fighting hard. Give that cancer the Voke, gees and arrogance. Please, much love. He replies, thanks for thinking of me, Songi. Definitely still fighting. Hope you are well and still displaying your special Selborne qualities. Bless you. He and I wouldn't speak again. May the angels carry him high, high, high in the sky. May those whose paths crossed with him, particularly the boys of Selborne Primary, always remember him and more his teachings, for it is those teachings that will make East London, the Eastern Cape, South Africa, Africa and the world a better place. Doug Voke, fare thee well.
Good morning, family and friends. As I stand here today with emotions overflowing, I have no words. I have no words for various reasons. First and foremost, the one emotion that stands out is that of appreciation and love. The appreciation from our family for the hundreds of messages, phone calls, social media posts, and visits from all of you from far and wide. Condolence messages stretching from all parts of South Africa. The Daily Dispatch, the Old Selbornian Association, both Selborne Primary and Selborne College, various schools from around the country, friends from Australia, America, Ireland, and England, to name a few. The Voke and our extended family are absolutely amazed at the love received. Thank you. To the Calvary Church, thank you for allowing us to be here today. You have allowed us to give a very special man a celebration that he deserves. To Donnie Stone and the rest of the team at Stones, a very big thank you to you as well. Your professional manner in taking this mad family on was, I am sure, quite a task. But you proved once again why you are the best in the business. To Lyle Hansen and your team for allowing us to utilize your services for the live streaming, thank you. A message of thanks to Darren Sanders at Photoquip for Dad's picture that is proudly displayed. To Jackie for all of your hard work with regards to the photographs and adding everything in, thank you so much. To Luke and MJ Lamarckwood, your organizing and planning of our golf game yesterday with 12 of our good mates was something very special. The Douglas Cup will now become an annual golf competition in remembrance of my dad. Your friendship means the world to me. Thank you. And then to the man that has been there for the family from the beginning, Gareth Sincock. Your calming presence during this time allowed us to take a break from the heartache and reflect on love and family. The minute that you walk through the door, one can feel your presence. I know that Dad is looking down and is proud of you. Quite frankly, you must have crept into my dad's heart all those years ago at Selborne Primary, even after you called the Dale ref a something cheat. Thank you for being there when we needed you. And lastly, our close friends that visited in hospital. One stands out in Mark and Jade Love. You never said no. You were and are a phone call away. And even if it was sneaking 12 Castle lagers into Dad's room so that in typical Voke style, have a final toast, you did it. Thank you. If I've left anyone out, I do apologize. It's not intentional, as I'm sure you can imagine. Well, where do I start? As I sit here in my office and type this up, put pen to paper about my dad, I am shaking. I am nervous. I am emotional. How do I put the last 70 years of stories and memories about Dad onto paper for a 10 or so minute speech? Impossible. But I will try nonetheless. As I stand in front of you today, you are looking at a man that is going through his greatest fear. And no, Jade, there aren't any frogs present at this time on stage with me, but the fact that I've lost a parent. I've lost a family member. The year 2003, I boarded a plane and headed to England for 2 years. My greatest fear came alive. Losing a family member whilst being so far from home was alive and well inside of me. One might say, well, you've been preparing for 20 years to face this fear. But the reality is, one can never be prepared. Dad, Pops, Bobby, Doug, Dougie, Douglas, Bossman, Mr. Voke, Sir, Tube to Auntie Sue, and Doll. These are the few of the names that Dad received over the last 70 years of life. But the best fun one for me was simply Dad. On the 13th of September, 1953, a small, chubby little chap took his first breath in the Gardens Hospital in Cape Town. He was the eldest at that stage, quite simply because he was the firstborn. And I actually wrote there, ha ha ha. Roger and Zeno were so delighted, they decided sometime later to have 2 more children, being Glenys and Sharon. After moving from Cape Town to East London and living in Allenby Road, it only made sense for Dad to attend Selborne Primary. And I firmly believe that this is where his love for the black and white started. Unfortunately, there are too many stories to tell about Dad's primary years, so I will fast track a bit. The Voke family moved to Cape Town in the middle to the late 60s, where Roger expanded his wings as a missionary. With that, Dad headed off to Westerford High School, where he excelled on the rugby field and not so much in the classroom. Dad flew through high school like a pigeon with one wing. Wasn't too keen on the classroom, but loved being outdoors on the sports field. He matriculated in 1971, and while all his friends headed off to the army, Dad still had the mentality of work smart, not hard. He applied for and soon joined the Air Force. Now I know what all of you are thinking.
And that's wow, I never knew that. Or wow, the Air Force. Yes, you heard right, the Air Force. And no, he was not a diver working tirelessly in the hopes of defending his country. And no, not working towards jumping from planes towards the enemy. He simply joined the Air Force as the driver of the Brigadier. You know the opening scene from Dumb and Dumber, where Lloyd Christmas picks up Mary Swanson and takes her to the airport? Well, pretty much like that. Over the years of Daryl, Gareth, and me knowing this, we made sure he knew what we thought of this important Air Force role that he had landed up with. And because he disliked the food that was provided at the Eysterplaat base, his stable diet was that of milk and Cook Sisters. This was probably why his physique resembled that of a greyhound. The year in this important Air Force role came to an end, and Dad decided that he wanted to pursue his love of education, his love of teaching. So Roger bundled him up with 2 bags and a toothbrush and sent him off to Graafrenet Teaching College to gain the much-needed knowledge and leadership skills. And I believe this is when Dad's life changed forever. One day, during a recess, 3 long-haired BG lookalikes stood propped up against a wall, catching the attention of the ladies walking by. Dad introduced himself, and the rest was history. The Dunxam 4 was established and has lasted all these years until today. Miles Dell, Brian Swartz, Jeff Scott, and Doug Voke became best friends overnight. The Dunxam 4 had emerged with a bond ever so tight and a love for each other like no other. The 4 of them were all in the same game of studying towards teaching, which made the friendship even better. Then on one cool Friday afternoon, the Graafrenet sun setting over the mountains, Dad decided to venture down to the hockey fields and examine the talent that was prancing around. And before he could blink, the slim Shetland pony made her way down the sideline, flashing a bit of leg, entered the top of the D, and gave a backstick of note. Top corner. Well, white doves flew overhead, a rainbow appeared, and even the song Fall in Love by Tom Jones was playing out of the first year's bedroom window. Elizabeth Smith ran past Dad and said, "Just for the record, that's how you shoot if you want to score." And like any love story ever told, from then on, the rest was history. He then thought that taking up hockey was a good idea. But after wearing his shin pads on his arms and being absolutely hopeless, even though he made the first side, Dad gave this up and decided to focus on his love of rugby. Fast-tracking to October 1975. After a night out on the town and Mom looking like she had just stepped out of a Vogue magazine, one wouldn't imagine what would happen over the next 9 months. But their firstborn arrived on the 12th of June, 1976. Funny enough, Mom and Dad got married pretty quickly thereafter. Since Dad's diet hadn't changed much since the Air Force days of milk and Cook Sisters, he was absolutely blown away at how much Daryl ate. Anything and everything went into this little twat's mouth. One day, when Dad entered the lounge, he had to forcefully remove the dog's paw from Daryl's mouth and send him to his room to think about what he had done. 4 years later, the only planned baby emerged. Planning meaning Mom and Dad both wanted the child. Gareth emerged on the 19th of September 1980. Now both Mom and Dad were in for a rough time, as this little jerk took after Daryl. Grocery bills went through the roof, margarine never lasted, and as for the potatoes, they never even had the time to get slightly soft. It was like living with 2 paper shredders. I believe this is when Dad really found his true love in that of the brown bottle, Castle Lager. To get away from the hustle and bustle of Daryl and Gareth, Dad's talent on the rugby field went from strength to strength. After making an impact on the first team field for False Bay, he received a call that any up-and-coming club rugby player dreams of: an invitation to play for the Western Province rugby side. Although it was in fact the B side, he was still over the moon. Believe it or not, he played on the wing, ran the 100 in 10.9 seconds, and never shied away from scoring in the corner. A claim to fame that he never let us forget was planting Michael du Plessis and Nick Mallett into row 4 of the old Newlands rugby stadium. Making headline after headline in the newspaper, Dad needed to make a call. Either focus on a long-lasting career to support the kids' eating habits, or continue on the rugby field. You can guess which one he chose. In 1982, Dad hung up his Western Province boots and became HOD of Sweet Valley Primary School. From HOD to deputy head, and finally to acting headmaster. Dad and Mom's first house was built by a very special friend in Strawberry Lane. A neat 3-bedroom home, white picket fence, close to a river, 2 hungry kids, and a Dulux dog called Panda. He hated that dog, gave it away to someone up the road as he too was eating his way to the top. I always asked him why didn't he give Daryl and Gareth away, but his answer was, "Your mother told me to give them another chance." Then on one rainy day in December 1983, Mother quivering down the passage after recently visiting the local doctor, she broke the news to Dad. Well, all hell broke loose in that 3-bedroom home, white picket fence, close to a river, with a 1-times missing Dulux dog called Panda. Doll, don't get mad, but I'm pregnant. Well, the rest is history. I won't divulge what was shouted or thrown, just that it was rather quiet thereafter in the Voke household. And yep, you guessed it. A strapping young lad entered the world on the 7th of June, 1984. Dad could see that he now had his dream child. A healthy young lad, well-behaved, and ate what was only required of him to eat. Due to my physique, they named me Brian Michael, after the world-class boxer, Brian Mitchell. December 1987, we received a phone call that would change our lives forever. A phone call that would be the start of a legacy that I today am so proud of. We were moving to East London, back to Dad's roots, with him being accepted as the deputy head of Selborne Primary School. Dad couldn't have been happier. Although he always stated that Cape Town was always his home and that he was merely leaving for East London for an extended holiday. That neat 3-bedroom home, white picket fence, close to a river, was now sold. The 2 older hungry kids and a Patrick Swayze lookalike packed up the car and headed off to East London. The 3 boys were spoilt. Not in the way that you may believe, but in a different way. We entered our dream home, number 17 Bamberg Road, Stirling. A large double-story house, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a dining room, a lounge, a bar room, a pool room, large gardens, jacuzzi, sauna, etc., etc. At the ages of 12, 8, and 4, we were all in our element. Test match cricket, where Dad was the umpire, or should I say mediator, between the three of us, was always pleasant. I was happy when he was there overseeing this important role, otherwise bloodshed was always on the cards. Whenever the ball was hit over the wall to the neighbours by yours truly, Dad made sure that I never had to fetch the ball, as there were two massive Alsatian dogs that would certainly rip his favourite child up. So Gareth was sent instead. The competitiveness between the three of us grew. All started off from Dad's stories about playing for Western Province. We always tried to outplay, outwit, and outdo each other as brothers, and Dad loved it. Mom, of course, was doctor, loving mother, carer, shoulder to cry on or run to, cook, and simply the best mother that we could ever have asked for. She kept her distance when the three of us got stuck into each other, though. All of this competitiveness was notched up even more when we first stepped into the overpowering yet calming corridors of Selborne Primary. With Dad under the guidance of Ken Schofer, who was headmaster at the time, we were in good hands. I believe this was the time in our lives when a different culture rained down over us. A culture of respect, manners, facing dangers, and ultimately becoming men. Over my earlier years of Selborne Primary, Dad taught me life lessons that I will never forget, and those that I use to this day. Never be late for a meeting or an event of any kind. Do what it takes to be on time. Always stand up for a lady when she enters the room. Remove your cap when saying hello, and look the person in the eyes when shaking their hand. Always have your socks up. On a daily basis, you are representing a brand. Not only your brand as a person, but your family and school brands as well. And this was his favorite. Always keep a clean bar. Say hello, thank you, and goodbye when you have to. Don't wait for someone to remind you. And always walk on the roadside closest to the traffic of a girl, so that if anything happens, you are the one that takes the fall. These are just a few of the life lessons that he taught us on the home front. Coupled with the Selborne ethos on a daily basis, reflecting on these lessons, it was very easy to have these engraved as part of our makeup. Dad finally took up his dream job. Ken Schofer retired and handed over the reins to Dad for the first time as headmaster in 1997. I can remember this proud moment like it was yesterday. I sat there in my proud black and white blazer as he addressed the school for the first time. He stated, "Boys, I want to tell you something today. Something that hopefully you will take home with you and live by. Something that one day you too will return to the school and be proud. So look around you. The most important people or areas in this hall are not the teachers, not even the classrooms. and certainly not me as headmaster. But it's you. Each and every one of you that sit here today with your legs crossed, it's you. If you don't take up the opportunity to embrace a rich culture within these walls, on the sports field, or in a music class, if you don't make use of the tools at your disposal to learn, then us as teachers have failed. This is where you will transform from boy to man. I was proud. That was my dad. Having 3 boys at his disposal meant that some of the manly work was passed on, as only my dad was happy to do so. Mowing the lawn, washing cars, and even setting up our caravan whilst camping at Glen Eden. Dad made sure that we were tasked with something to do. And now, when I look back, he was providing us with skills. He was leading us to become something better tomorrow than what we were yesterday. And of course, he hated setting up the caravan. Every December for about 35 years, the Voke clan and our close family friends camped at Glen Eden Caravan Park on the East Coast. 3 weeks of absolute heaven. Once again, we were spoiled. No fancy hotels, overseas trips or flights, just an old caravan for 3 weeks. And we loved every minute of it. The beach wasn't really Dad's favorite place to be for long hours of the morning. After a couple of hours of sun, he would always be the first to brave the hot sand and head back to the site to start preparing the lunch and obviously to quench his thirst. On arriving back to the camp, the lunch was started and the fun began. Hours of cricket on the park road, laughs around the fire at night, and midnight beach fires was a treat for any child growing up, and Dad and Mom provided that for us. Just like Dad provided for us, loved us, and did anything for his family, he also had his other family that he nurtured and loved, his Selborne family. He started on his leadership journey of bringing people together. He loved his staff, he loved his schoolboys, he loves his primary school. Personally, I don't believe he tried to do this. It came naturally to him. He made sure that he was the first person in the staff room before teachers arrived for their break. He included everyone from the deputy head to the newest student teacher. Everyone felt at ease and was happy in the presence of Dad. He was never one to shy away from the odd joke with his staff and treated everyone fairly, but still demanded the respect from his staff and boys. And that's important. The stories that can be shared of Dad's touring days are one for the record books. Some might frown upon these, and some might chuckle, but that is what made my dad who he was. A person that, on the one hand, leads a school to great heights, and on the other, the joker that makes people laugh. Heading to the back of the bus, returning from a rugby festival, comes to mind, but Dad thought that it would be hysterical to flash his bum to the Stirling bus driving quite closely behind. And whilst Miles Dell and the headmaster of Stirling at the time were in the front of the Stirling bus, they simply slowed down and chuckled to themselves. Then on a fishing trip up the coast somewhere, Dad thought it would be a great idea to put a live blacktail in the bath with Miles. Miles didn't know what hit him when a 25-centimeter fish was darting between his legs. On yet another rugby tour, Dad thought it would be hysterical to place a live chicken in Adam Robertson's room. Adam woke up in the early hours with a cock standing proudly at the foot of his bed, crowing like it was his last day alive. And Adam, if my dad was here today, he would say that it's ironic that there was another cock in your room. The list of stories go on and on. Miles and Dad decided to buy a bright yellow rubber duck called Sunbird to take their fishing skills from the rocks to the open waters. On our first trip out of the Ganubi River, we got onto the plain and hit a sandbank at 80 kilometers per hour. I flew almost to the point. Miles smashed into the center console, and Dad's knee hit the anchor. On the second trip that we went out, we exited safely this time out of the Ganubi mouth and headed towards Yellow Sands. 30 minutes of driving time, and on arrival at our destination, all excited, Dad took the bait out of the bait box, which had defrosted overnight, only to realize when opening it that it was in fact the yellow belly rockcod that he caught 2 weeks prior. We returned home and never fished that day. On our third trip that we exited the Ganubi mouth, we headed right this time. Once we found the spot where we would more than likely murder the fish, we sent down the lines and immediately started catching. It wasn't long after that in the distance, a huge semi-rigid boat with 200s on the back came speeding up to us. Unbeknown to us, it was the fisheries officer. Whilst Miles was taking a leak overboard and my dad's lips firmly attached to a castle, the officer said, "You are well in the reserve." To which my dad replied and said, "Yes, we are well." They chased us out after handing over the fish, and we left for home. Story after story, they never get old, and that's what I will hold dear to my heart. Dad was always and will live on as an old school guy. Like I have mentioned previously, he supported us when we needed it, but paid for something once. He was exceptional with his money, saving more than he spent. When asking Daryl what he wanted to do with his life, Daryl replied, HMS. For those that don't know, that's Human Movement Sciences. Dad burst out laughing and said, "No, seriously, what is it that you want to do?" After much debate after this, Dad agreed, but there was a clause. If you fail, you will pay back every last cent to me. And Daryl agreed. Daryl packed up the blue Ford Escort, which was handed down from my gran to my mother and then to Daryl, and he headed off to UPE. Daryl spent approximately 13 days out of 2 years at lectures. On the other hand, spent 717 days at Barney's. I'm not too sure if it was the fact that Daryl received 4% for his exams or because he had his ear pierced, but Dad pulled Daryl back home. This was in 1998. Daryl finished paying Dad back in 2012. Gareth, on the other hand, flew through every exam or test. Straight A's, degrees, masters, quite irritating really. I can remember speaking to Dad about the three of us and our educational skills in the classroom. And he said, "My boy, the three of you resonate with me through particular songs." I said, "How so?" To which he replied, "Well, Gareth reminds me of Queen's We Are the Champions, and you and Daryl remind me of Queen's I Want to Break Free." In 2001, the family made the choice to move into a schoolhouse provided by Selborne Primary. Dad was very happy about it, as it meant that he could walk to school on a daily basis. Well, Mom hated this idea as she was leaving her dream home in Stirling, but agreed to this change. Dad never walked to school. Time at 30 Allenby Road moved steadily along, but we could notice a change in Dad. He was becoming more tired, getting slower and out of breath as the days, weeks, and months went on. Then on one night at Hugga Hugga, wasn't feeling too well, coupled with pins and needles down the left arm. Gareth and Mom rushed him to hospital, and tests were done on his heart. The angels were there with us that day as we managed to stop a heart attack that was on the horizon. Roughly 11 or so years ago, Dad had a quadruple bypass. This affected the family immensely, on the one hand, but we were happy that we managed to have Dad around for years to come. The years went by at a pace that one wished to be able to freeze time, or slow them down at least. His 3 sons moved out of house, found jobs, and became independent, much to Dad and Mom's joy. The fact that I have to fast track by many years fills me with emotion as I could go on and on about Dad's life. At the age of 64, and in September of 2017, Dad decided that it was time to enter the school that he loved for one last time. Greet his teachers and hug his boys one last time. I can clearly remember him walking down the black steps, flanked by 600 or so boys and parents, and high-fiving all 600. The bell in the foyer rang in my dad's ears. For one last time. Dad had retired. And similar to that of death, where your body is no longer physically present, but your spirit lives on, is similar to that when those 600 high fives took place. Although not physically present, a legacy in spirit built up over 30 years or so lives on. Dad eventually sold our house in Stirling, which paved the way for Mom and Dad to buy another dream house, with this being their place of residence to this day. Glen Stewart, out on the East Coast, was home. A place where morning and afternoon walks take place, a place where one can smell the sea and hear the waves 24/7. It was just 12 months ago when I phoned him up and asked him how he was doing, to which he replied, "Hi, my boy, I'm just watching Daryl and Gareth." To which I replied, "How, Dad? It's a work day and Gareth is in Cape Town." He said, "Well, there are 2 whales jumping near the horizon." To which obviously I chuckled. Every single living thing on this earth has a lifespan. There is only one guarantee in life, and that is we will all die one day. And that, for us as a family, is now a reality. Dad's cancer was aggressive. It was rare. It was confident, just like my dad. No one said it would be easy. There isn't a manual on when something like that happens. You need to find a way to solve the situation, and if you fail, well, then you learn from your mistakes and move on. But unfortunately for Dad, there isn't a learning that will take place. The learning will come from our family on dealing with this heartache. One thing that we are all happy about and brings a warm feeling over us is that Dad had all his family and friends around his bed, holding a hand
a message here and there, and even a cold castle to wet the lips 24 hours before he took his last breath. I know he felt the love that day, which puts a smile on my face. Dad, I hope that you are dancing the night away on Blueberry Hill, in the castle on the hill, as it's 5 o'clock somewhere, because you were my best friend. Rest in peace, Dad. Until we meet again, palm over to you, and I love you.
I found my thrill on Blueberry Hill, on Blueberry Hill. When I found you, the moon stood still on Blueberry Hill. Lingered until my dream came true. The wind in the willow played love's sweet melody, but all of those vows you made were never to be. You caught me still, oh, you were my thrill on Blueberry Hill. The wind in the willow played I can't sleep away anymore. Ever since you first walked out the door, and I just started drinking to forget. But I don't think the worst has happened yet. All you ever do is bring me down, making me a fool all over town. They all wonder why I wear a frown. That's 'cause, honey, all you do is bring me down. It's funny how my whole world fell apart. I think I saw it coming from the start. I tried to tell myself that you'd be true, but I expected way too much of you. All you ever do is bring me down, making me a fool all over town. And they all wonder why I wear a frown. That's 'cause, honey, all you do. The sun is hot and that old clock is moving slow, and so am I. Workday passes like molasses in wintertime, but it's July. I'm getting paid by the hour and older by the minute. My boss just pushed me over the limit. I'd like to call him something, I think I'll just call it a day. me something tall and strong, make it a hurricane before I go insane. It's only 12:30, but I don't care. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. This lunch break is gonna take all afternoon and half the night. Tomorrow morning I know there'll be hell to pay. Hey, but that's alright. I ain't had a day off now in over a year. My Jamaican vacation's gonna start tonight.
Find the break of dawn. Find the break of dawn. That's the break of dawn, baby. Oh, yeah. I say baby.
Yeah, baby. I love it.
Tonight.
Tonight. What's that say?
Come tomorrow.
Come tomorrow, baby.
I'll be there.